Hey everyone, welcome to part 4 of my How to Play the Tomb Raider card game video series. In the previous video we looked about setting up the game, what the play area will look like, what cards you need to consider before you start playing, and also a little bit about how the location cards work. In this video we're going to talk about actually playing the game, so the sequence of play, what you do in each of those rounds, and then how you go about winning the game. So let's get started. The first round of the game is known as the Ready round. You can skip this round in solo play because this is purely used for multiplayer. In multiplayer, you will have 2 or more players and they will need to decide who will be going first in this turn. And by turn, I mean a completion of all of the rounds. So we have Lara Croft Duelist here going up against the Cowboy. In order to determine who will be going first, we will roll a number of dice equal to their move ability, which is the blue number here. So both Lara Croft Duelist and the Cowboy have a move ability of 2, so they will both be rolling 2 dice. So Lara's going to be rolling the red dice, Cowboy's going to be rolling the black dice. We roll them together, and you can see that the Cowboy rolled a 7 and Lara Croft rolled a 5, so in that case, Cowboy will go first. In case of a draw, you roll again. On subsequent rounds, you can actually decide not to re-roll. It might be that both players agree that they're okay with the current order of events, in which case you just skip this round as well. But if any players want to re-roll the Ready round, then you have to do it. Alright, so we've completed the Ready round and the Cowboy will be going first. Cowboy's going to be this green Lara Croft figure and Lara Croft Duelist is going to be the red character. So now we're into the action round. For the purposes of this demonstration, we're only going to be going up to a depth of 3, and also we're going to use 1 entrance, which is in column 2. So it's going to 3 columns, 3 depth. It starts 1, 2, 3 like that. Bear in mind that both players will have done the steps in the previous video, which is the setup phase. So you'll have laid out your player locations, you will have drawn your hand of cards, and you will be ready to go. So this is my starting hand for Lara Croft Duelist. As mentioned, your starting hand is the number of cards that you have chosen from your search ability. So my search ability was 3, so I chose 3 cards. But it's the action round, so it's time for some action. So let's start with number 1. You would complete these actions in the order that they are mentioned here and also in the documents below. So the first step is going to be the move action. So in the move action, you would move a number of locations equal or less than your move ability. So the Cowboy has a move ability of 2, so the Cowboy can move 2 spaces. However, if you move into an unknown location, which is a location that's not yet mapped out, then your movement will end. So you can't move 2 unknown locations, you would only move 1 in this turn. You can also choose not to move. This is different to being stuck, which is more of an impairment than it is a deciding not to move, but it's up to you. You can choose not to move if you don't want to, but in most cases it's better to move. It's also worth mentioning that if you choose to move through multiple locations in one turn, you must overcome the obstacle in each location before moving on. So if I was to go through 2 already known locations and they both had pit traps, for example, I would have to roll the dice to overcome those pit traps in both cases. But for now, my Cowboy is going to move. I can go left, right, or up. For this example, I'm going to go left, which is here. So in order to do that, I need to draw a location card. So here is the location. It's the chasm. Says, if you wish, you may roll 3 additional dice when searching this location. If you do so, you become stuck. Well, that's fun. So as mentioned in the previous video, the orientation of the card is so that the south-facing arrow points in the direction of the arrow that you came from. So in this case, we will be looking like that, the down arrow pointing towards the tomb entrance, and my Cowboy has moved there. So that's the move action. It's also worth noting that the second step is called the explore action, which is when you draw a location card and play it like this. So technically, playing an unknown location is called an explore stage. In some rare instances, you might draw a location card that can't be played at your current depth. For example, the Atlantean treasure is the treasure room, and it does have a minimum depth based on the level rules. So the level rules are actually in the instruction manual, but you could make that decision whatever you want. So for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to say it has to be a depth of 3 or less. So it might be 3 or more, sorry, that wouldn't make any sense. So if I drew this card just now, I wouldn't be able to play it. I would discard it and then it will need to get shuffled in later on. Okay, so that's the move and the explore stage. So the next stage is opponents play obstacles. Now in solo play, you would be playing obstacles yourself from your obstacle deck. So if you have a deck of obstacle cards here, and you're playing in solo play, you would turn over an obstacle and you would play it on your location like that. As the next part of the action phase, this player will have to overcome both this obstacle and the obstacle on the location. Do it one by one in whatever order they want, really. So in this instance, we're going to say that Lara Croft Duelist played this dark obstacle on the chasm location, just to mess with our cowboy friend. You could choose not to play an obstacle if you don't have any, but if you do, then it's almost always worth doing it just to impair your opponents. One thing to consider when playing obstacle cards is the danger rating. So Dark has a danger rating of 2. That's what this number here means. And what that means is that the location that you play this card on must have a danger rating of 2 in addition to the depth. So you may notice on the depth gauge it says 1+, 2+, 3+, and it uses the same icon as on here. So this is the danger rating. On the location card we also have +3. So what this means is that the danger in this location specifically is 1 + 3, which is 4. And because the dark obstacle has a danger rating of 2, it can be played on this location. If it was 1, 2, 3, or 4, it could be played here. If it was 5 and above, you would not be able to play that obstacle. It's basically just to balance the game to make sure that you're not putting too difficult obstacles too early on. Before we go to overcome the obstacle, one step that you can do in multiplayer would be to attack another raider, only if they're in the same location as you. So in this instance, I'm not in the same location, so I cannot be attacked. But if I was in the location, then we would be pitting our fight abilities against each other. So if we look at the two raiders, Lara Croft has a fight ability of 3 and the cowboy has a fight ability of 2. So if they were going to fight against each other, say the cowboy wants to shoot Lara, then you would have to roll that many dice. I only have this many dice here, so we'll say Lara rolls her dice and she gets a 6, 9, 10, and the cowboy will roll his 2 dice and he gets a 9. So in this instance, Lara would win the fight. If you lose a fight, then you would place a hit on your character. So the cowboy would take 1 hit of damage. His lowest ability is 2, which as we know now means his maximum life is 2. So the cowboy only has 1 life left. It's also mentioning that the number of damage you do, the amount of damage, will depend on various factors. You might have an action card that will do more damage. You might have weapons that do more damage. So bear that in mind when you are attacking each other. But one thing to consider when fighting other raiders is that you will not be able to search the location for an item discovery on that turn. So I think that at least in the early game, it's better to focus on item discoveries. It's only really going to be useful to try and take out your opponent if they have a lot of unsaved items that you want them to lose, which is a bit unfair. Obviously, if you're playing solo, you can't fight anyone, so you would just skip a step. Alright, so now it's time to talk about overcoming obstacles. So our cowboy moved to the chasm and there was a dark obstacle played on here. So let's have a quick read of the chasm card. As mentioned before, it says, if you wish, you may roll 3 additional dice when searching this location. If you do so, you become stuck. So this is not an obstacle, this is just something you can choose to do in a location, so that's pretty useful. That's nothing we need to overcome. The dark obstacle, however, is a trap obstacle, and it says here you need to do 7 search or 8 think, and you are stuck if failed. So in order to overcome this obstacle, I'm going to have to complete a search or think test. So if we have a look again at our Cowboy Raider card, he has a think ability of 4, which means I can roll 4 dice to go against the 8 think test. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to take my 4 dice, roll them, and we've got 10, 11, 13. So because we got 13, which is more than 8, we overcome the obstacle and we don't have any issues with that. If we had failed the obstacle, then we would become stuck because it says stuck if failed. And when we come to impairments, we will talk about what stuck means, but basically you don't want to be stuck. Stuck means you can't move until the next turn. It also means you can't search that location. So you should always be aiming to overcome the obstacles. Cool, so that is the action phase for the cowboy. So we moved, we explored a new location, we had an obstacle played by our opponent, we chose not to attack the other raider, and we overcame the obstacles. Those are the 5 steps of the action phase. So now the second player would complete their action phase. So in this case, Lara is going to decide to go upwards. So we would draw a new location card. We have here the lure. It says any creature obstacle cards at adjacent locations are moved to this location when it is explored. Very good. It is worth noting that when it says adjacent, it specifically means locations with access to each other. So not left and right in this case, because we only have north and south. All right, so Lara has moved to the lure location. We've completed the move and the explore stage, and now Cowboy can play an obstacle if he wants. So Cowboy is feeling particularly mean, and he's going to play the blinding flash trap. Now this has a danger level of 6, and we can see this is depth 2 and a +4 danger on the location, which means we can play the blinding flash trap. This card says 8 search or 10 think, and you get a search injury and you are stuck if failed. So I really don't want to fail this one. So if we have a look at Lara Croft Duelist, we have a search ability of 2 and a think ability of 3. So ideally we're going to want to use the think ability, and we need to roll a 10. So we'll take 3 dice and hope we get a 10. Yep, in this case we actually rolled 14, which is perfect, so we overcome this one. It's worth mentioning that trap obstacles remain in the location, so if you were to come back to this location later, you would have to overcome the trap again. If it was a creature obstacle, which I'm sure we will come across later, you can actually kill the obstacle and remove it from the location. So there's no other raiders for me to attack, so that is Lara's turn completed. Now we move on to the search round. So in the search round, players can complete what's called a normal search. So a normal search is when you can look in your current location for some items, and then you can potentially add them to your character. It's called a normal search because there are other kinds of searches that can be done by the use of action cards and things like that. So you cannot search in a location if you've used your fight ability in the previous turn. So that could be fighting another raider, or it could be fighting a creature like shooting a wolf, for example. You won't be able to search the location until the following turn, so something to bear in mind. So it's the Cowboy's turn first of all. He is going to search the chasm location. As per his raider card, he has a search ability of 2, so he gets to roll 2 dice. So rolling 2 dice, we get 6. And what this means is that I can go through my hand and see if there is an item discovery or trigger discovery of 6 or below. If I have one, then I can play that. Sadly, 6 is not a very good roll, so I will not be able to find anything on this turn. Now it's Lara's turn to search. Now one thing that didn't happen with the Cowboy, because it wasn't effective, was you have a search bonus in this location. So in the lure location, we have a search bonus of +1. That's this number here. So that means I get to roll 3 dice when I'm doing a search. So Lara will roll her 3 dice, and she rolls a 13. So with a 13, I'm going to choose to use the triggered door. So this has a search rating of 11, which means I can play it with a 13, and it says add an exit in any direction to any location with 2 or fewer unblocked exits. So you can see here that we have exactly 2 unblocked exits. So in this case, I can add any exit in any direction. So I'm going to choose to exit to the left. So I get this little green arrow, and I put it on the card, and that is the use of this discovery. Now that I have found something in the location, I will have to take one of these yellow E icons and put it on the location card to signify that this location is now empty. That means that neither I or my opponent can search this location for more items. There are some cases where you can search a location a second time, maybe through an action card, or maybe because the location card stipulates that, but in most cases you can only get 1 item from a location. So that is the search round, so now we move on to the draw round. The draw round is basically where you do the busy work required before moving on to the beginning of the turn again. So you would start off by discarding any number of cards from your hand. It doesn't matter how many cards you discard, it is entirely up to you. Next you would draw cards from your draw deck equal to your raider's think ability. So with the Cowboy, his think ability is 4, so he gets to draw 4 cards. Your maximum hand size is your think ability +6. So the Cowboy has a think ability of 4, so his maximum hand size is 10, and Lara's is 3, so that would make it 9. So something to think about when you're deciding which raider to use. If at any point your draw deck runs out of cards, you take the discard pile, you turn it over, shuffle it, and then that is your new draw deck. So that is discard and draw. The next thing you could potentially do is reset your character. If you think that you've managed to get yourself stuck in a location that you cannot leave, or you're not happy with where things are going and you want to reset your character, you can choose to do that at this stage. Essentially, resetting is treated the same way as death, in which case you would lose all of your unsaved items and all of your health would go back up to maximum, but we will cover damage and depth a bit later on. If you're at a save location, you can choose to save your progress at this point, and that is going to be moving your unsaved item discoveries to your saved item discoveries, as talked about in the previous video. Some locations have save crystals in them, and so you can use them to save your game, and you can also use discovery cards to add a save location to your current game. Saving is really important because it allows you to keep your items so you don't lose them on death. Then finally, if your raider died on the previous turn, you would use this opportunity to reload, and I'll explain how all of that works when we go over damage, death, and impairments. And that is a sequence of play. So at this point, you would go back to the ready round to determine the turn order, and you would continue on. So the cowboy might go this way, Lara might decide to go that way, the cowboy might also decide to stay here so that they can search again. It's whatever works. Eventually, you will make your way to the treasure room and complete a search in that location to obtain the treasure, and that would determine the winner. Time to briefly talk about damage and death. So we touched upon this just earlier on, and that was about the fight between Lara and the cowboy, but you can also take damage from obstacles and traps and things like that. So as previously mentioned, your maximum life is equal to your lowest ability score. So in this case, Lara's lowest ability score is 2, so she has a maximum life of 2. If she loses a fight test either against another raider or perhaps a creature obstacle, then she would take a hit. If she were to take 2 hits, then she would be dead, and unfortunately that means that you have to go back to your last save point. If you have saved in a location, your character would go back to there. So say I saved in the lure room, I could stay in the lure room, and that would be where I reload. But if I haven't had a chance to save, I would have to go all the way back to the entrance. When you die, you would remove any damage on your character and also any impairments, which we will cover in just a moment. You would also lose your unsaved item discoveries, so anything that was in your lower row of cards down here would be lost if you hadn't saved them. When you die in the middle of a turn, you would immediately end your turn and you would shuffle your discard pile back into the draw deck so that you can essentially start again from the new location. So now to talk about impairments. There are 2 impairments, not including hits of course. Those are injuries and stuck. So an injury is something that doesn't necessarily hit the raider for damage. Instead, it has a permanent or semi-permanent effect on the raider's ability scores. So a card resulting in an injury will tell you which ability it impairs. So for example, here we have the spike trap obstacle. This says move injury if failed. So if I were to fail the test against the spike trap, then I would have an injury on my move ability. So what does that mean? So an injury will reduce one of your abilities by 1. So my move ability is already only at 2, so if I was to receive a move injury, it would be reduced to 1. You should in the quest deck receive these different little numbers, so the blue ones are for your move ability. We can put that over there, and now you can see that my move ability is 1 instead of 2. Reducing my minimum ability also reduces my maximum life, so my maximum life is sadly now only 1. If it was 2 before, it's now moved down to 1. It is also possible to have the opposite effect, so it might be that I have an ability that increases my think ability, so I could increase that from 3 to 4, for example. It does go both ways. If one of my abilities is reduced to 0 by injuries, then I would die. An injury can be healed just like a hit of damage, so I could use, for example, the small medipack card which says heal 1 life. I could use that to heal 1 injury and get rid of that there, and I'd be back up to 2. Being stuck is slightly different. If you fail a test and become stuck, or you become stuck for some other reason, it means that your raider now cannot move until the end of their next action turn. It also means that they cannot search during this turn. So let's give an example. So in the case of the previous example, we had the blinding flash trap over here, and this says search injury and stuck if failed. So if I was to fail this, I would give myself a search injury. So I'm going to put this one down to 2. There is the 2. So I have my search injury, and I'm also stuck. So this means that I can't search at the end of this turn, assuming that the location is not empty. So I'm going to take this away for this example. So I cannot search, and I am stuck, which means I cannot move on my next turn. So on my next turn, I'm going to have to overcome this obstacle again, and I won't be able to move. So I could roll the dice, hopefully overcome the obstacle, and then on the next turn I will be able to move. So the long and short of it is, you don't want injuries or to become stuck, so try to avoid it if you can. And those are the general rules of play. So it's quite a lot to take in, and I'm sure that as you play you will have more questions. You know, what do certain cards do? Are there anything you need to take into account? Let's have a look at some of the cards we didn't talk about. Steal item you could play instead of attacking a Tomb Raider. Then there's also things that are like drawing 2 cards, a fairly simple card. This one here is playing instead of a normal search, so this is essentially an abnormal search. There's a lot that I didn't cover in this video because there are a lot of cards that do a lot of things, but hopefully these videos help you to understand how the game is actually played, and then it is up to you to fill in the blanks. So that's everything from me for this video, guys. I hope you found this helpful. In the next video, it'll be a very short one. We're going to talk about the Slippery When Wet expansion and any differences there are between Rules version 1.0 and 1.1. So until next time, thanks for watching. Thanks so much for watching. If you'd be interested in more videos like this, please click the subscribe button down below and give me a thumbs up to let me know that you enjoyed this video.